What we are seeing here, from the solar panels that power this facility to the bombard workers who built it, is that a green, renewable energy economy isn't some pie-in-the-sky, far-off future. It is now. It's creating jobs now. It is providing cheap alternatives to $140 a barrel oil now. And it can create millions of additional jobs and entire new industries if we act now. All across the country, local leaders and entrepreneurs and small business owners are providing the innovation and initiative needed to make this transformation possible. In Pennsylvania, an old steel mill has become the home of a new wind turbine factory because of the state's push for a renewable portfolio standard that requires the production of more alternative energy. Wisconsin is poised to gain more than 14,000 jobs at existing manufacturing facilities because of its investment in wind power. Where we're standing in southern Nevada happens to be one of the best sources for generating solar power in the world. And next week, our friend and Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid will come here to cut the ribbon on a new thermal solar technology plant. Between solar, wind, and geothermal energy, this state could create upwards of 80,000 new jobs by 2025. The possibilities of renewable energy are limitless. But to truly harness its potential, we urgently need real leadership from Washington, leadership that's been missing for decades. We've been talking about energy independence since Americans were waiting in gas lines back in the 1970s. We've heard promises about it in every State of the Union address for the last 3 decades. But each and every year, we become more, not less, addicted to oil, a 19th century fossil fuel that is dirty, dwindling, and dangerously expensive. And why is that? It isn't because the resources and technology aren't there. We know that because there are countries like Spain and Germany and Japan that have already leapt ahead of us when it comes to renewable energy technology. Germany, a country as cloudy as the Pacific Northwest, is now a world leader in the solar power industry and the 250,000 new jobs it has created. In less than 8 years, before we would ever see a drop of oil from offshore drilling, they have doubled their renewable energy output. And they did it by using technology that in some cases was paid for by the American people through our own research and development tax credits. The difference is their government harnessed that technology by providing the necessary investments and incentives to jumpstart a renewable energy industry. And Washington hasn't done that. What Washington has done is what Washington always does. It's peddled false promises, irresponsible policy, and cheap gimmicks that might get politicians through the next election, but won't lead America through the next generation of renewable energy. And now we're paying the price. Now we've fallen behind the rest of the world. Now we're forced to beg Saudi Arabia for more oil. Now we're facing gas prices over $4 a gallon, gas prices that are decimating the savings of families who are already struggling in this economy. Like the man I met in Pennsylvania who lost his job and couldn't even afford to go on a job search because he couldn't fill up his gas tank. That's how badly folks are hurting, and that's how badly Washington has failed in this area. Now, for decades, John McCain has been a part of this failure in Washington. He has gone further, and he deserves credit for this in his party when it comes to speaking out on climate change. That's commendable. But time and time again, he has opposed investing in the alternative sources of energy that have helped fuel some of the very same projects and businesses that he's now highlighting in his campaign. He voted against biofuels, against solar power, against wind power, against a 2005 energy bill that represented the largest ever investment in renewable sources of energy, a bill that Senator McCain's own campaign co-chairman called, and I quote, the biggest legislative breakthrough we've had since he's been in the Senate. That bill wasn't perfect. It contained irresponsible tax breaks for oil companies that I consistently opposed and that I will repeal as president. But the tax credits in that bill contributed to wind power growing 45% last year, the sharpest rise in decades. If John McCain had his way, those tax credits wouldn't exist. And if we don't renew key tax incentives for alternative energy production right now, tax incentives that John McCain opposed continuing, we could lose up to 116,000 green jobs and $19 billion in investment just next year. And now he's talking about a tax credit for a more efficient car, even though he helped George Bush block these tax credits twice in the last year. After all those years in Washington, John McCain still doesn't get it. I commend him for his desire to accelerate the search for a battery that can power the cars of the future. I've been talking about this myself for the last few years, but I don't think that a $3 million prize is the way to go. When John F. Kennedy decided that we were going to go put a man on the moon, he didn't put a bounty out for some rocket scientist to win. He put the full resources of the United States government behind the project and called on the ingenuity and innovation of the American people, not just in the private sector, but also in the public sector. That's the kind of effort we need to achieve energy independence in this country, and nothing less will do. But in this campaign, John McCain's offering the same old gimmicks that will provide almost no short-term relief to folks who are struggling with high gas prices. Gimmicks that will only increase our addiction for another 4 years. Senator McCain wants a gas tax holiday that will save you, at most, 30 cents a day for 90 days. That's only if the oil companies don't just jack up the price and pocket the savings themselves, which is exactly what they did when we tried this. We tried the same thing when I was in Illinois. He's willing to spend nearly $4 billion on more tax breaks for big oil companies, including $1.2 billion for Exxon alone. He wants to open up our coastlines for drilling, a proposal that his own top economic advisor admitted won't provide any short-term relief at the pump. It's a proposal that George Bush's administration says will not produce a drop of oil, not a single drop, for at least 10 years. And by the time drilling is fully underway in 20 years, our own Department of Energy says the effect on gas prices will be, and I quote, insignificant. Insignificant. Just yesterday, Senator McCain actually admitted this. In a town hall meeting, he said, and I quote, "I don't see an immediate relief, but, quote, the fact that we are exploiting these reserves would have a psychological impact that I think is beneficial." A psychological impact. In case you're wondering, in Washington speak, what that means is it polls well. It's an example of how Washington tries to convince you that they've done something to make your life better when they really didn't. The American people don't need psychological relief or meaningless gimmicks to get politicians through the next election cycle. They need real relief that will help them fill up their tanks and put food on their table. They need a long-term energy strategy that will reduce our dependence on foreign oil by investing in the renewable sources of energy that represent the future. That's what the American people need. Meanwhile, the oil companies already own drilling rights to 68 million acres of federal land. I want you to think about this. The oil companies have already been given 68 million acres of federal land, both onshore and offshore, to drill. They're allowed to drill it, and yet they haven't touched it. 68 million acres that have the potential to nearly double America's total oil production. And John McCain wants to give them more when they're not using what they've got. That might make sense in Washington, but it doesn't make sense for America. In fact, it makes about much sense as his proposal to build 45 new nuclear reactors without a plan to store the waste someplace other than, guess where? Right here in Nevada, at Yucca Mountain. These are not serious energy policies. They're not new energy policies, and they certainly are not the kind of energy policies that will give families the relief that they need, or the country, our country, the oil independence that we must have. Now, I realize that gimmicks like the gas tax holiday and offshore drilling might poll well these days because people are desperate. But I'm not running for president to do what polls well. I'm running to do what's right for America. I wish we could wave a magic wand and make gas prices go down. I understand how tough things are right now for folks. But we can't just wave a magic wand, and we can't just offer gimmicks. What I can do and what I will do is push for a second stimulus package that will send out another round of rebate checks to the American people. What I will do as president is tax the profits, the record profits of oil companies, and use the money to help struggling families pay their energy bills. I will provide a $1,000 tax cut that will go to 95% of all workers and their families in this country so they can help deal with rising costs of not just gas, but also food and medical costs. I will close the loophole that allows corporations like Enron to engage in unregulated speculation that ends up artificially driving up the price of oil. That's how I will provide real relief to the American people. That's the change that we need. I have a very different vision of what this country can and should achieve on energy in the next 4 years and in the next 10 years. I have a plan to raise the fuel standards on our cars and trucks with technology that we already have on the shelf today, technology that will make sure we get more miles to the gallon. And we will provide financial help to automakers and auto workers to help them make this transition. I will invest $150 billion, $15 billion a year, over the next 10 years in alternative sources of energy like wind power and solar power and advanced biodiesel, investments that will create up to 5 million new jobs that pay well and can't be outsourced, that will create billions of dollars in new business like you're already doing right here in Nevada. And before we hand over more of our land and our coastline to oil companies, I will charge these companies a fee for every acre that they currently lease but don't drill on. If that compels them to drill, we'll get more oil. If it doesn't, the fees will go towards more investment in renewable sources of energy. When all is said and done, my plan to increase our fuel standards will save American consumers from purchasing 500 billion gallons of gas over the next 18 years. My entire energy plan will produce 3 times the oil savings that John McCain's ever could. And what's more, it will actually decrease our dependence on oil, while his will only grow our addiction further. And that's the choice you face in this election. When you're facing $4 a gallon or $4.20 or $4.30 a gallon gas, do you want a gas tax gimmick that will at most save you 30 cents a day, that's a quarter and a nickel, for the next 3 months? Are you looking for a drilling proposal that won't provide you a drop of oil for the next decade and wouldn't go into full production for 2 decades? Or would you rather have a second rebate check and a $1,000 tax cut to help you deal with rising costs right now? When you look down the road 5 years from now or 10 years from now, do you want to see an America that's begging that's begging dictators for more oil than we can afford? An America that's fallen further behind the rest of the world when it comes to the jobs and industries of the future? Or do you want to see more places like the Spring Preserves and Bombard Electric, more green jobs, more green businesses, more innovation, more ingenuity that helps this nation lead the way on affordable renewable energy? That's the future I know we can have. That's the future I believe in, and that's where I will lead us if I have the chance to serve as your president. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. It will not come without some costs or some sacrifices, but it is possible. It is necessary. And places like this and people like you prove that we have the resources and the skills and the will to begin that work today. So I look forward to joining you in that effort, and I thank you for all that you've already accomplished. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. All right.